Hello, I'm Lucy and today I'm bringing you my 2016 in books. 2016 with a bit of an up and down reading year for me. There were some months where I absolutely flew through all formats of books, and there were some months where I literally didn't read or listen to a single word. From this, it's meant that there's not necessarily these are my top 5, these are my bottom 5. They've just been things that have stuck in my mind for various reasons, so I've just created a few different categories so that you can have a little bit of an insight into my 2016 in books, and I hope you enjoy. A year is a long time, so long in fact that I managed to start and finish some book series all within the year. These are all actually trilogies because, let's face it, what self-respecting series is not a trilogy nowadays. The first one that I started and finished was the CurseWorkers by Holly Black. This is made up of White Cat, Red Gloves and Black Heart. This is the series that I totally binge listened to on audiobook, partly because it's narrated by Jesse Eisenberg and I could just listen to his voice all day. I actually listened to this series twice within the year. I enjoyed listening to it that much. It is set in a world where there is a thing called curse working, which is where certain people who are curse workers have the ability to change other people's emotions or look or physically harm them by touching them. Curse working is kind of like being a mobster. It's illegal. People know it goes on. People know people who are curse workers, but you don't admit to it. And we follow Cassell, who is the son in a curse working family, and it's just sort of about his life, how he tries to fit in. Even though I listened to this literally at the very, very start, the very first few days in January 2016, I still sort of love it. Like I say, I listened to it twice in the year, I'd listen to it again. Yeah, really great series. Next is the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown, which is sort of an epic science fiction that melds ancient mythology with futuristic dystopian space travel. We can mash all those things together. It works, it's fine. We follow Darrow, who is a helldiver in the deepest depths of Mars, who is destined to live a short and dreary dark life until he is given the opportunity to change his destiny and overthrow an entire regime. This is a twisty-turny corkscrew of a plot with lots of action, lots of political intrigue. All I can say is, if you read Golden Sun, the second instalment, make sure that you have Morningstar, the final instalment, there ready to start reading because, yeah, definition of cliffhanger right there. Finally, I read the Queen of the Tearling series by Erika Johanssen. This is a historical fantasy which follows a girl, Kelsey, who is trying to take her rightful place on the throne. It has a little bit of magic, has a little bit of romance, but it's mainly focused on the sort of political and physical struggles that she has to get onto the throne, and just highlighting the fact that everything isn't black and white. You have to make some difficult decisions, you have to make some sacrifices if you're in a position of authority. I thought that the characters are just really interesting and three-dimensional. You're not always on the side of the protagonist, and I don't think that you're meant to be. And yeah, it's a slow burner, but it's really, really good. I love a good audiobook, and I think a good audiobook can really change your opinion on a story. And these are a couple of the books that I have listened to this year and really enjoyed. Another celebrity name for this narrator is Zachary Quinto, who narrated The Dispatcher by John Scalzi. This was a short story that I believe was exclusive to Audible and you could download for free, so obviously not going to turn down anything free, and I'm really glad that I didn't. It's my first John Scalzi, but it made me go on to read Lock-In, which is another one of his, just because I enjoyed this so much. This is set in a world where suddenly, for unknown reasons, anyone who was purposefully killed wakes up again in their home about 15 minutes later. If it's an accidental death, then you just die. So there are people called dispatchers who are brought in to like hospital situations. So if there's an operation where there could be an accidental death and it looks like everything's going to go wrong, a dispatcher will step in and purposefully kill the patient so that they definitely wake up back in their bed and can sort of try again. And it's just a little insight into the life of a dispatcher. Really interesting premise, really well narrated, just a great little story. I am trying to get more into short fiction, whether it is novellas or short standalone stories or collections of short stories. I've tried to sort of up my intake of those, and I found a really good way of doing that is Kindle singles. It's quite difficult to say. Often these are showcasing the work of sort of well-known authors, and one of the ones that I read that stood out is Night of Cake and Puppets by Laini Taylor, which is actually sort of 2.5 in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. It's basically a bit of extra backstory for how Susanna and Meek met and got together, and it's really cute, it's really sweet. They are two characters that I felt we didn't really quite see enough of in the main books, so it was really, really great to have this little extra. Also, super gorgeous cover alert because it's beautiful. The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn is a standalone. It's super short, and it's the only other Gillian Flynn that I've read other than Gone Girl, but I just thought it was, for such a short book, I think it's like 76 pages or something, it has so much sort of plot and development, and it draws you in so quickly, which is obviously what a good short story should do. It is full of the darkness that I think everyone now associates with Flynn's writing, and it's one of those ones that, because it's so short, if I told you what happened, I'd tell you all of what happened. So just spend half an hour or an hour reading it, and it's worth it. The other short story feature that has sort of stood out this year is a collection of short stories called Tales from the Blue Room by lots of different authors. I actually found this after reading Cogheart, because the author Peter Bunzel wrote one of the stories in this anthology, and it's such a range of stories. I think that's why I really enjoyed it and why I really sort of kept it in my memory. The other couple of books that I've read that have been short stories collections this year have just sort of all been much of a muchness, and I don't know whether it's because it was all single authors writing lots of different stories themselves, and this is just a collection of authors. I think that did make a big difference. The subject matter as well was just an absolute plethora of genres. So there's one that has time travel, one that's a retelling of like Jack and the Beanstalk from the Giant's point of view, and it's really sort of weirdly sexualised, and there's one that's just about a family gathering after a funeral, and there's like a bit of a family secret. So yeah, there's just like a real mix of things. It has barely any reviews on Goodreads, and I just think it's an absolute gem of a book. So please, if you get the chance to check this out, really do, because I think more people need to read it, need to hear about it, and I want to talk to people about, you know, what's in it, and I can't do that if I'm the only person on Goodreads that's read it. There are always some books in the year that you are really excited to read, that you know are going to come out, and you just get yourself so hyped up about, and you think, yes, this is going to be the book, it's going to make my life, and it doesn't. And I had a couple of those this year, unfortunately. One of them is the final book in the Obernewtyn series by Isobelle Carmody, which is The Red Queen, which, if anyone has watched any of my really old ancient videos or ever spoken to me in real life about books, probably knows that the Obernewtyn Chronicles is like one of my really big formative series that I read, that I started when I was like a very young teen, and it started out so strong and then kind of just petered off, and the fan base has been waiting and waiting and waiting for this final book, which had been promised for ages, and every time we thought it was going to be the last book, it wasn't, and then finally, Red Queen, this is the last one, and it came in at like a whopping like 1,500 pages. It felt like 1,500. It was a long book, so we were like, yes, we will get all of the answers to all of the questions. Like, Carmody's given herself time to do all of the things, and she did not. Well, sure, she did. It ended, but like the first third of it was just went off on a total tangent, which you'd think I wouldn't mind a tangent because it's me, and tangents, you know, tangents and talking and not being concise, that is my thing. So you'd think that this would be my thing, but oh my word. Oh, so disappointing. Like, I've been waiting literally 15 years for this book, and it was just... The other one from 2016 that was a real disappointment was All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders, and this had a lot of hype about being this really sort of weird special mishmash of science and fantasy, science and magic, because it follows a girl who is a witch and a guy who is like an entrepreneurial scientist. Is that a thing? But I think that's what he was. And they sort of become friends and form this relationship, and then as they sort of become adults, there's the situation that arises that means the end of the world might be coming, and they have to sort of work together to try and fix it, and it just didn't work for me at all. I think I really enjoyed the ideas, and I really enjoyed sort of the premise, but just this writing style, I could not get on board with at all. I just found it really jarring and really clunky, and really, like, the similes and the metaphors didn't make sense to me, and yeah, just pretty much from like page 10 I was not down with it. And I did claw my way through it because, you know, when you're like, it might get better, but it didn't get better, unfortunately. Sometimes I will read a book, and when I've immediately finished, or if I'm going to put it onto Goodreads, I'm not absolutely blown away by it. I'll think, yeah, it was good, solid 4 stars, 3 stars, but there's something about it that just sort of sticks in my mind, and I'm not sure whether that's what makes a good book. It probably is, because it's still in my head and I'm talking to you about it now. It's just that at the time I wasn't like, it's amazing, but over time it sort of grows on me, and these are the books that I've read at some point in the last year that I thought, they were alright, but now I'm like, actually no, they were really good. Silver on the Road by Laura Ann Gilman is a old Wild West fantasy, which I absolutely love, that mix of like the old Wild West and the magic, and it's so good. This was a little bit different to something I've read before, in that it was a bit more like dark, a little bit more gritty. The West itself is run by the devil, and he's referred to as the devil, but you never truly know whether he is the devil or whether he's just a guy who has an awful lot of influence and isn't really a very nice man and is quite sinister. And we sort of follow a girl who works for him, who was given to him by her parents when she was young, and she's got to an age now where she has to decide whether she wants to continue to work for the devil or whether she wants to go out in the big wide world on her own. And she decides she's going to continue to work for him, so he sends her out to sort of learn the ways of the world so that she can become his left hand. At the time I felt like the book just dragged a little bit too much for me to really truly love it, but the sequel, The Cold Eye I believe it's called, is released today. It has been plopped onto my Kindle like a couple of hours before I filmed this video, so I will be reading that later in the month, and I'm just like really looking forward to it, really looking forward to being immersed back in the world. I think that was the thing, it was the world that really sort of struck me on this one, and I've never really read anything like it. Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff is a book of 2 halves, and I think that's maybe why it's taken so long for me to realise that I liked it as much as I did. It is the story of a marriage told from the 2 perspectives of the husband and the wife, and the first half is the husband's perspective and the second half is the wife's perspective, and it sort of just shows how things aren't always what they seem, and how one person construes a situation is not how the other one does. And so the first half was really good and I enjoyed it, but you need to sort of get through that to get to the second half to fully understand, I think, what Groff's trying to do, and to get everything you can out of the story. And the more you reflect on it, the more you sort of get out of it. And I think it's something that I'd really love to reread, because reading the husband's perspective again after having read the wife's perspective, I think would be really, really interesting. But it just sort of makes you think about people and how no 2 opinions are the same. So they are the main, not highlights, but just picks, I guess, that I've chosen to just quickly talk to you about. I've read quite a few other books this year. I'm gonna whiz some of them past there now. If you've read any of them, do let me know what you thought. Yeah, hopefully I will be back filming now. Would be quite nice, trying to reboot the channel for 2017. So yeah, until next time, toodles.